I sent a love confession to the wrong girl by mistake. 3 years later, she became my wife. Sometimes late at night, when she's already asleep beside me, I stare at her and still can't believe how absurdly everything turned out. The moonlight sneaks through the half-open curtain, laying soft silver lines across her face, and I find myself whispering the same question I've been asking for years. How the hell did we get here? If you told me back in 2013 that I'd marry someone because of a text I accidentally sent to the wrong person, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was a 21-year-old college guy with too much caffeine in my bloodstream and too little courage in my chest. My biggest achievement was surviving midterms without collapsing, and my biggest dream was winning over a girl I could barely talk to without tripping over my words. Her name was Emily Brooks, or rather the Emily Brooks, tall, effortlessly confident, the kind of girl whose laughter filled an entire hallway and made heads turn. She was in my English literature seminar, the type who quoted Jane Austen and actually sounded like she meant it. We'd worked together on a group project once, and ever since, I'd been orbiting around her like a clueless satellite, pretending it was coincidence every time I just happened to sit near her. Our friendship was that delicate, half-defined kind, where you never quite know if you're just friends or something a little more. We joked, we shared notes, we texted occasionally about assignments, but behind every emoji I sent, there was a silent prayer that one day she'd notice me for real. My friends, of course, were relentless. "Bro, she likes you," said Aaron, my roommate, one night while eating ramen in his usual dramatic way. "You're blind if you can't see it." She literally smiled at me because I dropped my pen, I argued. "Exactly," he said, as if that was proof enough of destiny. By the end of that semester, I was hopelessly smitten. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. I'd rehearse clever things to say, only to forget them the moment she walked into the room. Still, she was kind. Too kind, maybe. She laughed at my awkward jokes, asked about my weekend, and one time, when I was sick, she actually brought me notes from class. That small gesture became the centerpiece of every daydream I had for weeks. But courage is a funny thing. It builds up slowly, like water heating on a stove, until one day it just boils over. Mine boiled over on a chilly November evening. It was the end of the fall term. The campus was covered in wet leaves and the air smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. Everyone was tired. I remember sitting in my dorm room staring at my phone like it was some kind of weapon. I'd written and deleted my message at least 10 times. "Hey, Emily, I know this might sound out of nowhere, but I really like you. Not just as a friend. You make my days better without even trying. I just needed you to know it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was honest." I wanted her to know how I felt before the semester ended, before she went home for the holidays, before life pulled us apart again. Aaron saw me hesitating. "Send it," he said flatly. "You'll regret it if you don't." I remember the way he said it, like it was the simplest thing in the world. He didn't understand that I felt like I was about to jump off a cliff with no parachute. Still, I took a deep breath, selected her contact, and pressed send. That little blue tick appeared instantly. My heart dropped, my stomach twisted, and for a second, I actually felt weightless. And then, 2 seconds later, realization hit me like a train. I had 2 Emilys in my phone. The first one, Emily Brooks, my crush from class. The second, Emily Sanders, someone I'd met once at a campus charity event. I barely remembered her. She'd volunteered at the booth next to mine, selling handmade bracelets. We'd exchanged numbers because she promised to send me a picture of the group photo. That was it. My brain froze. My fingers went numb. I double-checked. And there it was, Emily Sanders. "The wrong Emily." No, I muttered, fumbling for the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to delete the message, but it was too late. She'd seen it. The screen said read at 8:43 p.m. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I could already imagine the look on her face, the confusion, the awkwardness. I pictured her showing it to her friends, laughing, and then my phone buzzed. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. "But do you maybe want to grab coffee and laugh about this accidental confession?" I stared at the message like it was written in another language. For a full minute, I didn't move. Aaron leaned over my shoulder. "Dude," she replied. I nodded numbly. "What did she say?" "She wants to grab coffee," he smirked. "Then go." "Go? Are you insane?" I literally confessed to the wrong person. "Exactly," he said, grinning. "You can't possibly make it worse. I should have ignored it. I really should have. But there's a strange kind of bravery that comes when you've already embarrassed yourself beyond repair. So I said yes. The next afternoon, we met at this tiny cafe near campus, the kind of place that always smelled like cinnamon and had mismatched chairs. I got there early, still trying to convince myself this wasn't the dumbest decision of my life. When Emily Sanders walked in, I recognized her immediately. Short brown hair, bright eyes, a kind of unbothered confidence that made her seem like she belonged everywhere. She spotted me and smiled, a genuine, amused smile. "So," she said as she sat down, "I hear you're in love with me." I groaned and hid my face behind my coffee cup. Please don't start, she laughed, a soft musical sound that didn't feel mocking. Hey, relax. I thought it was sweet. Weird but sweet, we talked. At first, just to kill the awkwardness. I told her about how I'd meant to text the other Emily, and she teased me mercilessly about it. But the more we talked, the easier it became. She was funny, quick-witted, a little sarcastic, but never mean. We ended up staying there for almost 3 hours. When we finally left, she said, "You know, this might be the most entertaining accident of my semester." I laughed. Glad I could humiliate myself for your amusement. Oh, don't say that, she said. It's kind of refreshing. Most guys on campus try so hard to impress girls. You, on the other hand, just sent a love confession to a stranger? Yeah, I said dryly. That's my charm. She tilted her head, smirking. Maybe it is. That night, as I walked back to my dorm, I kept replaying our conversation in my head. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, it was just a funny misunderstanding. But there was something about her that lingered. The next morning, I got a message from her. Thanks for the coffee. You're less awkward than I expected. I grinned at my phone, and you're meaner than I expected. I'll take that as a compliment. It started like that. Playful, casual. She'd text me random things like photos of her coffee or sarcastic comments about her professors. And somehow, I started looking forward to them. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was just a friend, someone I could be myself around without trying too hard. But slowly, she started showing up in my thoughts more than I cared to admit. I stopped thinking about Emily Brooks as much. I'd still see her around campus, still exchange polite smiles, but the rush I used to feel wasn't there anymore. Instead, my phone would buzz, and I'd see a text from the wrong Emily, and suddenly my day would brighten. One evening, about 2 weeks after our coffee date, she asked, "So tell me honestly, are you still hung up on the other Emily?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were searching. I hesitated. I thought I was, but now, I'm not so sure. She smiled, a little softer than before. That's good to hear. Why? Because I was starting to feel bad for liking the guy who confessed to the wrong girl. That made my heart skip. You like me? She shrugged casually. Maybe, a little. Don't let it go to your head, but it was already too late. When I got back to my dorm that night, Aaron was waiting for me. Well, he asked. I think, I said slowly. I might be in trouble. He frowned. What kind of trouble? The kind where I accidentally like someone who was never supposed to be part of the plan? He grinned. Then it's the best kind of trouble. Looking back now, I realize that night was the beginning of everything. The start of something that didn't make sense, yet felt perfectly right. I didn't know it then, but that single wrong message, the one that made my stomach drop and my palms sweat, was about to change the entire course of my life. Sometimes I wonder if there's a version of me out there, in some alternate universe, who never hit send. Maybe he still sits in that dorm room, staring at his phone, overthinking every word. Maybe he never meets her. Maybe he never laughs over coffee with the girl who'd become his best friend, his partner, his wife. But that's not me. I hit send. I made the mistake. And that mistake turned out to be the best decision I ever made. By the time winter break rolled around, everything between Emily and me had settled into this strange rhythm. We weren't dating, at least not officially, but we weren't exactly just friends either. We'd text every day, sometimes from morning until midnight, joking about the most random things, our professors, bad cafeteria food, her obsession with peppermint hot chocolate. I'd catch myself smiling at my phone like an idiot, and Aaron would roll his eyes every time he saw it. You're gone, man, he said once. You've fallen. I tried to deny it, but the truth was obvious. Somewhere between our accidental coffee date and those late-night conversations about nothing, something real had started to grow. Still, I didn't want to ruin it by labeling it too soon. She'd told me once, half-jokingly, that she didn't believe in college love stories. They all start fast and burn out even faster, she said. Like those cheap sparklers kids wave around on New Year's? I'd laughed, but part of me wondered if she meant it. So I didn't push. I just let things happen naturally, even though every time I saw her name pop up on my phone, my chest tightened in that familiar way that only happens when you're falling for someone who doesn't know it yet. January came, and the campus returned to life. The snow that had blanketed the walkways turned to slush, and students shuffled through it like zombies carrying too many books. I remember the first time I saw her again after the break, standing outside the student center, wrapped in a gray scarf, her cheeks pink from the cold. She waved at me, that wide, confident smile lighting up her face, and just like that, every trace of winter melted away. You survived the holidays, she teased as I walked up. Barely, I said. My mom keeps asking if I'm dating anyone, and my dad keeps telling her I'm too awkward to find a girlfriend. She laughed. Sounds like your family knows you well. They do, I said. What about you? Did you manage to convince your parents that you're not secretly dating the guy who accidentally confessed to you? She shrugged. Oh, they already think we're engaged. That made me laugh harder than I should have. She looked proud of herself. I may have told them you were a decent guy, which by their standards is practically a proposal. Decent? I'll take it, I said. You should. That's the highest compliment you'll ever get from my dad. We ended up spending that afternoon together, wandering through the bookstore, pretending to judge people by their coffee orders. When she ordered a black coffee with 2 sugars, I said, "Bold choice. Very mysterious," she smirked. "And you with your caramel latte? What does that say about you?" "That I have depth," I replied. "Depth covered in sugar and milk foam," she shot back. I remember thinking, God, she's quick. And I liked that. I liked that she never let me win easily. Over the next few months, she became part of my life in ways I hadn't expected. We studied together sometimes, though we'd end up talking more than reading. She'd drag me to random art exhibits downtown, and I'd pretend to understand what the paintings meant. "See?" she'd say, pointing at some abstract swirl of color. "This one clearly represents the emotional chaos of human existence." "Or it's just paint," I'd counter. "Maybe the artist was out of blue." "You have no soul," she'd say, smiling. And somehow, every little argument only pulled us closer. But as winter faded into spring, I started to feel it. The slow, unmistakable shift in how I looked at her. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper, heavier. Something that scared me a little because I hadn't planned for it. She was never supposed to be the one. She was supposed to be the wrong message, the wrong turn, the funny story I'd tell my friends years later. Instead, she was becoming the center of everything. One evening, we were sitting in the quad, watching the sunset bleed across the sky in shades of orange and gold. She was lying on the grass, arms behind her head, and I was sitting beside her, pretending to scroll through my phone so I wouldn't stare too long. "You ever think about how weird life is?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," I said. "Like how one tiny choice can change everything." "You mean like hitting send on the wrong number?" She laughed, nudging me with her foot. "Exactly like that." There was a pause. Then she said, softer this time, "You know what's even weirder? I'm glad you did." I turned to look at her, but she was still gazing at the sky. Her voice had that faraway tone, like she was saying something more than she wanted to admit. That night, when I got back to my dorm, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. "I'm glad you did." It echoed in my head for hours. For the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like if this wasn't just a joke anymore, if we were actually something real. But then I thought about all the stories that ended badly, all the friendships that fell apart once someone confessed. I didn't want to lose her, not after everything, so I stayed quiet. I told myself timing mattered, that maybe the right moment hadn't come yet. That illusion shattered a few weeks later. It was early April, the time of year when the campus came back to life. People filled the lawns again, guitars and laughter echoing between buildings. Emily and I were on our way to the dining hall when she ran into someone she knew. A tall guy with perfect hair and an even more perfect smile. "Oh my God, Luke," she said, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen before. They hugged like old friends, and I stood there awkwardly, suddenly invisible. "Luke, this is Daniel," she said, turning toward me. "Daniel, this is Luke. He and I went to high school together." Luke shook my hand. "Nice to meet you, man." "You too," I said, forcing a smile. But the rest of that lunch felt off. She and Luke caught up, laughing about old teachers and inside jokes, and though she didn't mean to, she barely looked at me. I hated that it bothered me. I hated that I cared. When we finally parted ways, she seemed completely fine. I wasn't. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something sharp and unfamiliar twist inside me. Jealousy. Not because Luke had done anything wrong, but because for the first time I realized I didn't just like her, I wanted her. I wanted to be the person who made her light up like that. A few days later, I saw them again, walking out of the library together. She waved when she spotted me, but I just nodded and kept walking. That night, she texted me, "You okay? You seemed weird earlier." I typed, deleted, retyped a dozen responses before finally sending, "Yeah, all good, just tired." She didn't reply right away. The next morning, she showed up at my dorm, unannounced, holding 2 coffees. "You're lying," she said as soon as I opened the door. "About what?" "About being fine. You're terrible at hiding things." I sighed. "It's nothing." "Daniel," her voice softened. "Talk to me." And before I could stop myself, the truth slipped out. "I didn't like seeing you with him." She blinked. "Luke?" I nodded. "It's not his fault. He's probably great. I don't know. I didn't like it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a slow sip of her coffee and said, "You're jealous." "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "Maybe I am." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. Then she smiled, not mocking or teasing this time, but gentle, almost shy. "You know," she said, "for a guy who accidentally confessed his love to the wrong girl, you're really bad at keeping your feelings a secret." I didn't know what to say. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something soft, like vanilla and rain. "For what it's worth," she whispered. "I didn't like seeing you ignore me either." Something shifted between us after that. We didn't kiss, not then, but the air between us changed, charged, fragile, full of unspoken things. She stayed for a while, sitting on the edge of my bed, talking about nothing and everything. When she finally left, she turned at the door and said, "Maybe this whole thing wasn't an accident after all." I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at my phone, reading our old messages, smiling like an idiot every time I scrolled back to that first one. The message that started it all. The wrong message. The mistake that somehow began to feel like fate. Spring turned into summer, and with it came the inevitable uncertainty that follows every college semester. Finals, goodbyes, half-packed suitcases, promises to stay in touch that everyone knows are lies. But not us. Emily and I had fallen into something we couldn't quite define, something that existed in that gray area between friendship and love, where every glance lasts too long and every goodbye feels like it might be the last. After that morning in my dorm, when I'd admitted I was jealous, everything between us shifted. We didn't talk about it directly, but it was there, woven into every look and every laugh. When she'd brush past me in the hallway, her fingers would sometimes graze mine, just enough to send electricity through my veins. When she'd call late at night, her voice softer than usual, I'd find myself smiling in the dark like an idiot. It wasn't official. But it was real. One evening in late May, she asked if I wanted to take a walk by the river. Finals were over, the campus had emptied, and the world felt still for the first time in months. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of rain. We walked along the water's edge, the sound of crickets filling the quiet between us. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked suddenly. "After this? After college?" I said. "Yeah, I mean, everyone seems to have it all figured out. Jobs, grad school, internships. And I'm just here." She kicked a pebble into the river and sighed. "I keep thinking I'll wake up one day and magically know what I'm supposed to do." "You'll figure it out," I said. "You always do." "You think?" she asked, glancing at me. "Yeah," I said. "You're too stubborn not to." She laughed quietly. "You make it sound like a compliment." "It is," I said. And then I stopped walking because suddenly she was close enough for me to see the reflection of the moon in her eyes. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The world around us seemed to fade, the water, the breeze, even the distant hum of cars. It was just her and me, caught in that fragile space between friendship and something more. I wanted to say it. I wanted to tell her everything I'd been holding back. But before I could, she smiled and said, "You're staring again." "Sorry," I murmured, looking away. "Don't be," she said softly. That night, I went home and wrote her a message I never sent. It said, "If I fall for you, please promise not to laugh." I deleted it before I could regret it. Over the summer, we stayed in touch constantly. She went back to her hometown, a few hours away, while I stayed on campus for a part-time job at the library. Our text became the highlight of my days. We'd talk about everything. Movies, music, the weirdness of growing up. She'd send me pictures of her cat sleeping on her laptop, and I'd send her selfies of me pretending to study but clearly slacking off. Sometimes we'd call and just sit in silence, listening to each other breathe. It was strange how easy it felt, how natural. But distance has a way of testing even the strongest connections. By late July, her replies started taking longer. I tried not to overthink it, but every time my phone stayed silent, a familiar ache grew in my chest. One night after a day of no messages at all, I finally texted, "Everything okay?" 10 minutes later, she replied, "Yeah, just been busy." That was it. No heart emoji, no joke, no warmth. Just cold words on a glowing screen. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the silence that followed over the next few days said otherwise. Then one afternoon, she called out of nowhere. "Hey," she said. Her voice sounded tired. "Sorry I've been MIA." "You don't owe me an apology," I said, trying to sound casual. "I know," she said, "but I wanted to call." There was a long pause before she continued. "Do you ever feel like life moves too fast? Like one minute everything's perfect, and the next it's just gone?" "All the time," I said quietly. "Why?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I guess I'm just scared of losing good things before I even understand what they mean." I wanted to tell her she wasn't going to lose me. That whatever we had, whatever this was, wasn't going anywhere. But before I could speak, she said, "I met someone." "Kind of." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not serious," she added quickly. "It's just, I don't know. We've been hanging out." "That's great," I lied. "I'm happy for you." "Are you?" "Of course," I said, even though I wasn't. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more but didn't. "Anyway, I just wanted to be honest." "Yeah," I said. "Honesty's good. You sound upset." "I'm not," I lied again. "Just tired." "Okay," she said softly. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, waiting for it to light up again. It didn't. The next few weeks were quiet, painfully quiet. We still texted, but it wasn't the same. Her messages were shorter, less frequent. I tried to play it cool, tried to convince myself it was fine, that she was allowed to have her own life. But every time I saw her name on my screen, my stomach twisted with something that felt a lot like heartbreak. I didn't tell anyone, not even Aaron. I just buried myself in work and pretended everything was normal. Then in August, she texted me, "Are you free this weekend?" My heart jumped. "Yeah, why?" I replied. "I'm coming back to campus early. Thought maybe we could catch up." I stared at the message for a long time before answering. Of course. When I saw her again, it was like no time had passed. She looked the same, maybe a little tanner, her hair a bit shorter, but her smile still had the same effect on me. We met at our usual cafe. At first it felt awkward, like we were strangers trying to remember how to talk. But eventually the old rhythm returned. We joked. We laughed. We shared stories from the summer. Then, as we were leaving, she stopped and said, "I ended things." "With the guy?" I asked. She nodded. It wasn't right. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask why she was telling me. The other part already knew. "Do you ever think," she said quietly, "that maybe we keep missing the right timing?" I looked at her and said, "Maybe the timing's only wrong until it isn't." She smiled at that, a small, hopeful smile that reached her eyes. After that day, everything changed again. The distance that had crept in over the summer disappeared. We were closer than ever, texting until dawn, sharing playlists, confiding in each other about everything. But now, every word carried an undercurrent of something unspoken, something that neither of us dared to name. One night in early September, after hours of talking about nothing, she said, "Remember when you accidentally confessed to me?" "How could I forget?" I said. "You said it was the funniest thing that happened to you that semester." "It was," she said. Then, after a pause, "But I never told you something." "What's that?" "When I got that message," she said, "I almost didn't reply." "Really?" "Yeah, I thought it was some kind of prank. But something about it felt real, like you actually meant it." "I did," I said quietly. "Even if it wasn't meant for you?" "Especially because it wasn't meant for you," I said. "Because if it had been, I would have tried too hard to make it perfect." But it wasn't perfect. It was messy and stupid and real. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she whispered, "I'm glad you sent it." That night, when I hung up, I knew there was no going back. Whatever this was, whatever had started as an accident was no longer a mistake. It was something that felt inevitable, like it had been waiting to happen all along. And deep down, I think we both knew it. Autumn came back around before I realized how much time had passed. The heat of summer had faded, replaced by that crisp chill that carried the smell of fallen leaves and freshly sharpened pencils. A new semester meant new classes, new students, and for most people, a clean slate. But for me and Emily, it felt more like a continuation. A story that had been paused and was now quietly resuming where we left off. We didn't need to talk about what we were anymore. We just existed together, fluid and comfortable. We met for coffee before classes, studied side by side in the library, walked home under the orange glow of streetlights like it was the most natural thing in the world. And yet, underneath that easy rhythm, there was something quietly building. Something neither of us wanted to name because naming it would make it real. And real things can break. There were moments that almost forced us to say it. Like the night she showed up at my dorm crying because she'd failed her midterm in psychology. She wasn't a crier. She was the kind of person who turned every bad situation into a joke. But that night, her usual spark was gone. She knocked on my door, her voice small. "Can I come in?" I let her in, and before I could even ask what happened, she said, "I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said softly. "You're just tired." "No, I'm serious," she said, sitting on my bed. I studied for days. I thought I had it, but I froze. My brain just stopped working. I sat beside her, close enough to feel her trembling. "It's one test," I said. "It doesn't define you." "Yeah, tell that to my scholarship," she muttered, wiping her eyes. I handed her a tissue, and she laughed weakly. "You always know what to say, huh?" "Not really," I said. "I just hate seeing you upset." She looked up at me then, and for a moment we didn't move. Her eyes were red from crying, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something. I don't know which of us leaned in first, but suddenly she was kissing me. It wasn't fireworks or slow-motion romance like in the movies. It was messy, unexpected, and absolutely perfect. Her hands were cold from the night air, her lips soft and hesitant at first, then surer, hungrier. When we pulled away, she stared at me for a long moment before whispering, "I've wanted to do that for months." I smiled. "You should have said something." "You should have," she replied. We both laughed, the tension breaking like a dam giving way. And just like that, everything changed again. From that night on, we were inseparable. We still didn't call it dating, not at first, but everyone around us knew. Aaron teased me constantly. The wrong Emily, huh? He'd say, smirking. Guess fate knew better than you did. I couldn't argue. Every moment with her felt like something I didn't know I'd been missing. She made the ordinary magical. Studying for exams turned into late-night laughter. Grocery runs became adventures. Even silence felt warm when she was near. But love, as I'd learned, isn't just laughter and easy days. It's vulnerability, too, and sometimes that's what scares you the most. The first crack came one weekend in November. We were supposed to meet for lunch, but she canceled last minute. Family emergency, she texted. I'll explain later. I didn't ask questions, just told her to take care. But then it happened again the next week. And again. She grew distant, distracted. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself she was just stressed, but one night I couldn't ignore it anymore. We were sitting in her apartment watching some bad rom-com when I finally said, You've been quiet lately. She paused the movie. I've just had a lot on my mind. Like what? I asked gently. She hesitated, then sighed. My mom's sick, she said. She's been in and out of the hospital for months. I didn't want to talk about it because, I don't know. I didn't want to dump it all on you. My chest tightened. Emily, you can tell me anything. You know that, right? She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I just didn't want you to see me as broken. Hey, I said, taking her hand. You're not broken. You're human. That night I stayed with her until she fell asleep, her head resting on my chest, her breathing soft and uneven. I watched her and thought about how love isn't just about the good days. It's about showing up when it hurts, when things aren't perfect. And in that moment, I realized something simple but terrifying. I didn't just like her. I loved her. The next few months were hard. Between her mother's illness and our classes, everything felt heavier. There were days when she didn't want to talk, days when I felt helpless. But we found small ways to stay connected. A note left in her locker, a late-night phone call, coffee waiting for her at the library before exams. Love became less about butterflies and more about presence, about choosing each other even when life got messy. Then came the night everything almost fell apart. It was February, right after Valentine's Day. I'd planned something small, a dinner, a playlist of songs that reminded me of her, a letter I'd written but wasn't sure I'd give her yet. But when I got to her apartment, she wasn't there. Hours passed. No text, no call. I tried not to panic, but my mind raced. Finally, around midnight, she called. Her voice was quiet, almost slurred. Daniel, she whispered. Can you come get me? She was at a bar near campus, sitting alone at the counter when I found her. Her eyes were glassy, her hair messy, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. What happened? I asked, sitting beside her. She shook her head. I just needed to forget for a bit. Forget what? Everything, she said, her voice cracking. My mom's getting worse. They think it's spreading. My chest ached as I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. You don't have to fix it, she snapped suddenly. You don't have to save me. I'm not trying to save you, I said quietly. I just want to be here. She looked at me then, eyes full of anger and pain. Maybe I don't want you here. The words hit harder than she intended, I think. We sat in silence for a long time before she finally whispered. I'm sorry. It's okay, I said. It's not, she murmured. I took her home, made sure she got to bed safely, then walked back to my dorm in the freezing night, my heart heavier than it had been in years. For a few days after that, we barely spoke. I thought maybe that was it, that the weight of everything had finally broken what we had. But then one morning, I woke up to a text. I'm sorry for pushing you away. Can we talk? When I got to her apartment, she was sitting on the couch with 2 cups of coffee. I don't know how to do this, she said. How to let someone love me when everything around me feels like it's falling apart. I sat beside her. You don't have to know how, I said. You just have to let it happen. She looked at me for a long time, then leaned in and kissed me. Slowly, like an apology and a promise all at once. When we pulled away, she whispered, I love you. That was the first time she said it. And even though the world around us was crumbling, in that moment, everything felt steady. From then on, we stopped pretending. We were together. Really together. There were still bad days, hospital visits, sleepless nights, tears that came without warning, but there were good days too. Days filled with laughter, warmth, and small, ordinary moments that felt sacred. I learned then that love isn't always grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's just showing up again and again, for the person who once entered your life by accident. Looking back now, I think that was when I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Not because everything was easy, but because even when it wasn't, she was still my favorite part of every day. Spring returned the following year like it always did, soft and golden and deceptively hopeful. The cherry trees around campus began to bloom, scattering pale petals that stuck to the pavement after the rain. It should have been a peaceful time, but everything inside me felt like a storm. Emily's mother was getting worse. and every week seemed to bring new updates that were harder to bear than the last. Between hospital visits and classes, Emily was stretched thin, surviving on coffee and nerves. I did everything I could: rides to the hospital, late-night food runs, holding her hand in sterile waiting rooms. But there was only so much anyone could do against something like that. Some nights, she'd sit on my couch and cry quietly into my chest, and I'd just hold her, wishing I could trade places with her mother, wishing I could do something to make the pain stop. Then one morning she called me in tears. "She's gone," was all she said. I was in my dorm, half awake, staring at my phone like the words didn't make sense. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask how. I just went. I found her sitting outside the hospital, her hair tangled by the wind, her eyes empty in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't say a word. I just sat down beside her and took her hand. She didn't speak either, but she didn't let go. We stayed there for hours, long after the sky turned dark and the world blurred around us. Grief does strange things to love. It either tears you apart or welds you together in ways you don't understand until years later. For us, it did both. Some days she'd cling to me like I was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Other days she'd pull away, retreating into herself, quiet and unreachable. I learned not to take it personally. I learned that love isn't just about closeness. It's also about space. Some nights I'd get a text at 2 in the morning. "Are you awake?" And I'd be out the door before I even answered. We'd drive with no destination, windows down, music low. Sometimes she'd talk. Sometimes she wouldn't, but she always reached for my hand. By summer, she started to smile again. Not all the time, not like before, but enough to remind me that the light was still there. We took a weekend trip to the coast one Saturday just to get away. I still remember that day vividly. The way the wind tangled her hair. The way she laughed when the waves chased her up the sand. The way her eyes softened when she looked at me and said, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For staying," she said. "You didn't have to." "Yeah, I did," I said. "You're stuck with me now." She smiled and said, "Good." That was the first weekend I really saw her laugh again. We spent the night at a cheap motel by the water, the kind with flickering lights and scratchy sheets. We shared takeout noodles and talked until dawn. Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet moments, I realized that I couldn't imagine my life without her anymore. It wasn't just love. It was something deeper, something that felt like home. When fall came again, she decided to take a semester off. "I just need time," she said, "to breathe." I supported her completely, but selfishly I worried. She moved back to her hometown for a few months to help her dad, and suddenly, the world felt emptier. We still talked every day, texts, calls, video chats, but it wasn't the same. I missed the way she filled up a room without even trying. I missed the little things, her humming while studying, her sarcastic comments during movies, the way she'd steal my hoodie and pretend it was hers. Distance tests you. It makes you doubt what you already know. Some nights I'd wonder if we'd grow apart. But then she'd send me a photo of the beach, of her cat, of her morning coffee, and beneath it she'd write, "Miss you." Those 2 words were always enough to keep me going. In December, she surprised me. I was sitting in the library, half asleep over a pile of notes, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was, smiling, tired, beautiful. "You didn't tell me you were coming back," I said, standing so fast I almost knocked my chair over. "I wanted to see your face," she said, grinning. "Totally worth the trip." I laughed, pulling her into a hug that lasted far too long and still wasn't long enough. "How long are you staying?" I asked. "Forever if you'll have me," she said playfully, and though she meant it as a joke, something inside me clicked. Forever. I wanted that. I wanted her. Every version of her, every season, every mood, every scar. We spent Christmas together that year. I brought her to my parents' house, and to my surprise, they adored her instantly. My mom hugged her like she'd known her for years, and my dad, who usually kept his distance, laughed harder with her than I'd ever seen. "She's the one," he said quietly that night, while washing dishes beside me. I didn't answer, but he was right. I already knew. A few months later, on our anniversary, if you could call it that, I took her back to that same riverside where we'd once walked under the stars years ago. The air was cool, the trees budding with new life. I'd brought a small box in my jacket pocket, my hands shaking the way they had the night I first texted her. She looked at me, confused, when I stopped walking. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, smiling nervously. "Everything's right." I reached into my pocket, and her eyes widened as I got down on one knee. "Emily Sanders," I said, my voice trembling. "I accidentally confessed my love to the wrong girl once, but you've been the right one ever since. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes filling with tears. Then she laughed, a soft, disbelieving laugh that melted every ounce of fear inside me. "Are you sure you've got the right Emily this time?" she teased. I grinned. "Pretty sure." She nodded, tears spilling over, and said, "Then yes." When I slipped the ring onto her finger, she whispered, "You idiot." I know, I said, laughing. But I'm your idiot. That night we lay by the riverbank again, the stars glittering above us. Do you ever think about how weird it all was? She asked. That message, that accident? Every day, I said. And I wouldn't change a thing, she smiled, resting her head on my chest. Maybe fate doesn't make mistakes after all. And maybe she was right. Because in that quiet moment with the woman I'd once texted by accident sleeping beside me, I realized that sometimes love doesn't come from plans or perfect timing. Sometimes it's just a single, clumsy, beautiful mistake that changes everything. We got married on a mild spring afternoon in 2017, under a canopy of white blossoms that rained petals every time the wind blew. The ceremony wasn't extravagant, just close friends, family, and a small garden behind an old brick chapel. But it was perfect. Emily walked down the aisle in a simple lace dress that caught the sunlight, her smile soft but steady. I don't remember much of the officiant's words. I just remember her eyes, the way they held mine like nothing else existed. When it was time to say our vows, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't mess this up." I grinned. Too late. I already sent the wrong text. The guests laughed. But when she said "I do," my world went still. After the ceremony, we drove away in my old beat-up Honda Civic with "Just Married" scribbled across the rear window in white paint. The reception was at a little lakeside inn where the fairy lights reflected off the water. We danced barefoot on the dock, her head resting against my chest as the music played softly. "Remember when you said you didn't believe in college love stories?" I asked. "I lied," she murmured. I laughed quietly, tracing small circles on her back. Good, because this one's mine. Marriage, I would learn, wasn't a fairy tale. It was a series of small choices every day to stay, to listen, to forgive. The first year was wonderful and chaotic. We moved into a tiny apartment downtown with creaky floors and a leaky faucet that groaned like an old man every time you turned it on. She filled the place with life. Plants in every window, books piled on the coffee table, her laughter echoing through the rooms like sunlight made sound. I'd come home from work to find her cooking dinner, music playing, her hair tied up messily, and I'd think, this is it. This is happiness. But life, as always, has a way of testing even the happiest stories. A few months after our wedding, Emily's dad fell ill. It wasn't sudden. His health had been fading since her mother passed, but the decline was fast. We spent weeks driving back and forth to her hometown, sleeping in hospital chairs, living off vending machine snacks and coffee. Through it all, she was strong, almost too strong, refusing to cry, refusing to rest. One night, I found her sitting alone in the hallway outside his room, staring at the tiled floor. "He's all I have left," she whispered. "No," I said gently, kneeling beside her. "You have me." She looked up then, her eyes glassy, and said, "I know. And that's the only thing keeping me sane." He passed away in October. The funeral was quiet, just a handful of relatives and neighbors. After everyone left, she stood by his grave long after sunset, her fingers laced with mine. "Do you think they can see us?" she asked softly. "Your parents?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I think they can." "Then I hope they know I'm okay," she whispered. Because for the first time in a long time, I actually am. Grief visited our house again, but this time we faced it together. We learned to build around the loss, to fill the empty spaces with love and laughter instead of silence. She took up painting again, something she hadn't done since college. I'd come home to find her sitting on the floor, canvas in her lap, brush in hand, colors smeared on her arms like battle paint. "It's messy," she'd say, frowning at her work. "It's beautiful," I'd tell her. Because it was, just like her. One evening, about a year into our marriage, I came home to find dinner burning slightly and her standing by the stove with that look she always had when she was deep in thought. "Everything okay?" I asked. She turned, smiling faintly. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "How weird it all is," she said. "How one wrong message turned into this." I walked over, wrapped my arms around her, and kissed her temple. "Best typo of my life," I said. She laughed, leaning back against me. "You didn't even spell anything wrong." "No," I said, smiling. "But I did text the wrong girl." She tilted her head to look up at me. "And would you do it again?" "Every time," I said. 1,000 times over. Years passed, quietly, beautifully. We built routines that became rituals. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and old vinyl records. Friday nights were for takeout and board games we never finished. Sometimes we'd just sit on the balcony with coffee, watching the city lights flicker below us, saying nothing at all. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and I'd think, this is what peace feels like. Of course, not every day was perfect. We argued sometimes about chores, about bills, about how she always forgot to close the toothpaste cap. But even in those moments, even when we were angry, I never doubted us. Love wasn't about avoiding fights. It was about choosing to stay even after them. Every night, no matter what, we'd end up tangled together, whispering apologies half asleep. On our 3rd anniversary, I surprised her with a trip to the same coastal town where we'd once escaped 2 years before. The same cheap motel, the same scratchy sheets, the same ocean stretching endlessly beyond the window. "You're sentimental?" she teased. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just like where everything started to make sense." That night we walked along the beach, hand in hand, the waves brushing our feet. "Do you ever think about how life could have gone?" she asked suddenly. "Like if you'd never texted me by mistake?" "Sometimes," I said, and then I stop, because I don't like any version that doesn't have you in it. She smiled. That same soft smile that used to undo me years ago. "You're such a sap." "You love it," I said. "Unfortunately," she replied, laughing. We lay in the sand for hours, listening to the ocean breathe. And as I looked up at the stars, I thought about everything we'd been through. The confusion, the laughter, the pain, the healing. Love hadn't come to us the way stories say it should. It hadn't been a lightning strike or a fairy tale. It had been an accident. A beautiful, clumsy, perfectly timed accident. The next morning, as we packed our bags, she picked up her phone and smirked. "You know," she said, "I still have that first message you sent me." "No way," I said. "You kept it?" "Of course," she said. "It's our origin story." She handed me the phone, and there it was, the same text I'd written nervously all those years ago, still sitting in our message thread like a relic of fate. "Hey, Emily, I know this might sound out of nowhere, but I really like you. Not just as a friend. You make my days better without even trying. I just needed you to know." I read it, smiling. God, I was such a wreck when I sent that. "You were," she agreed. "But I'm glad you did." She leaned up to kiss me softly. "Because you might have sent that message to the wrong girl?" "But," I asked. She smiled. "You found the right one." We left the beach that morning hand in hand, the sunlight painting our shadows across the sand. And as the ocean faded in the distance, I realized something simple and profound. Sometimes, life doesn't give you what you plan for. It gives you what you need, disguised as a mistake. And that mistake becomes your forever.